Now this video is going to be the first of two videos on F124 today. This is going to be focused on the first gameplay deep dive from a few days ago, which I did not cover at the time, and I can tell you there's another one later on today around 5 PM UK time. This video focused on handling, the one later focused on career mode, and I can tell you for a fact that's going to be quite juicy. Now, if you guys want to tune in later, be subscribed to the channel for when that video does eventually drop. Drop a like on this one and let's get into it and let's talk about the first handling deep dive from a few days ago. I'm sure you guys have seen the trailer by now. I'll leave footage and clips on screen explaining or showing what I'm going to be talking about in this video. We have the official article here, so we're going to basically dive into it and also give my closing thoughts, which I want to focus on mainly at the end. So this is going to be quite quick, as you guys have probably seen this already. So the big tagline is dynamic handling in F124. So we're going to see exactly what's new in this game. According to this, the dynamic handling is the biggest physics upgrade that has ever been made in an F1 title before. So your personal driving style now creates new strategic racing opportunities thanks to the new immersive handling model, which sounds great. Really, really good in principle. So everyone, you, me, your best mate, we all have different driving styles. Much like in real life, you know, notoriously in the past, Jenson Button, a very smooth driver, good in changeable conditions. Sergio Perez, the master of tyre saving. All these things are going to play a role. Verstappen, an aggressive driver. Leclerc, aggressive driver. Alonso, also like sort of understeer. You know, all these little things, each driver has their preferences, and that is actually going to have an effect in the game. They mention, as in previous articles, they've worked with Max very closely on the new handling system, so it's going to basically redefine the feeling of the car and produce a more realistic, predictable performance across wheel and pad. Starting off with new suspension kinematics, which gives the cars much more realistic feeling of weight distribution and center of gravity. We saw that highlighted with 3D renders, meshes in the trailer where suspension moves and kind of you see the car moving and responding to all the bumps in the road a lot more accurately. Spring and damper forces have been revised to give better sense of how the car reacts to varying loads, altitudes through all different types of corners, kind of emphasizing what I just said. This in turn does give you more flexibility over car setups. You'll need to prioritize the right suspension compromise depending on each track layout and your personal driving style. So it's not going to be like a meta where, you know, each track has its own suspension, because you might drive differently to the way I drive. So 1 plus or 1 minus on an adjustment might actually work better for you or better for me. Now, I have my doubts if this is going to actually be the case. I feel like once everyone finds the meta will be the meta. But if this is true and we do get some actual customizability and some personality and some, you know, personal aspects to setups, that would be a genuine game changer, especially for league racing and esports. It says, do you want more stability in higher speed sections or better traction at low speed? You now have better control and more realistic tools to tune these variables to your liking, which we'll get into in just a bit. Another big thing is improved tyre model, which should be interesting. So it goes on to say, with more variation in both the carcass and surface temperatures, depending on factors like tyre pressures, ambient conditions, track conditions, and of course, once again, your own driving style. So this was in past games. Whether they've tweaked it and they want to make it a bit more, again, personalized to your experience and what you do, that could be interesting. Again, if they've actually managed to do this and pull this off, this is a pretty big thing. You know, I have, like I said, my doubts, because every game has a meta, and once everyone figures it out, especially competitively, everyone basically copy and pastes, you know, setups and run the same thing, and then whoever can drive it best will be the quickest driver. In clean air, a smooth operator can make the most of their tyres and extend their stint in the race, whereas an aggressive driver in dirty air, locking their brakes is more likely to damage their rubber and wear it out faster. Now, we've seen, you know, footage and things online of the beta and just general things, which I don't want to talk about too much, but in a nutshell, if you flat spot, you can add a lot of tyre wear to your tyres, and you have a flat spot which you're going to have to kind of work through, which could be interesting. Based off this, I find this quite interesting. I wonder what would happen in alternate scenarios. So it mentions a smooth driver, you know, in clean air, and an aggressive driver in dirty air. But what about an aggressive driver in clean air and a smooth driver in dirty air? Does that also have, you know, different effects? Overall, it seems like we're going to have a lot more variability in this game. We've improved how the tyres interact with the track surface in variable conditions. For instance, as the track starts to dry, after a rain shower, you can seek the remaining wet parts of the track to call your wets or intermediates, which is massive, absolutely huge. Listen, we've seen iRacing recently implement what I would say is the best wet weather system. It's extremely realistic, accurate, and challenging. I love the rain in iRacing, and I want to try and do more of it. But that aside, it's good to see F1 applying some of this, because ultimately it doesn't really change how wet weather performs, because the way F1 game, generally has always worked in the past and in the future probably is going to be when the track is wet, the surface is the same and there's just a general grip slider that gets adjusted, and basically, you have more grip or less. Doesn't matter what racing line you take. But this will actually give us slightly different racing lines, because you want to make sure you cool your tyres, especially in those kind of delicate conditions. So very interesting. And there'll also be more realistic transitions between wet to dry, creating more jeopardy around when to make that all important decision to box for a change. Now, all I can think of is we might not going to get a single lap change. It might be a bit longer, but there might be more tyre temp issues, more tyre wear. You're more likely to lock up, or you might struggle with cold tyres if you go for dries a bit early, lack of grip, all these things basically kind of opening up the window and increasing the possibilities of what could happen in different scenarios. So now we have another big one, improved aero modeling. It goes on to say we've used computational fluid dynamics, or CFD as we all know it, to bring significantly more detail to our aero simulation. This gives you a much more accurate feeling of the forces that generate downfalls from the wings and the floor. So that's interesting. It's hard to articulate or put into words, but the downforce you're generating with setup adjustments and the aero levels, you should be able to tell if the car has enough downforce or not, depending on your wing levels. When you're behind another driver, you'll of course feel slipstream effects on the straights, but we have now added much more, big emphasis there, much more realistic turbulence or dirty air, which creates a realistic reduction of grip in the corners when you're closely following a rival. Now this is huge. This is going to change a lot of things, especially league racing and esports, because in F1 23, it was the opposite. And I've held this opinion from the beginning. I'm convinced, and if you try hard enough, when you're following a driver nose to tail, super close, it's actually easier to follow than it is to drive in clean air. In clean air, the minute you overtake somebody, especially with a bit of tyre wear, I've always felt more understeer. Whereas when you're following, it's so easy to be locked in and the car feels sharp. Let me know if you've ever noticed that in the comments down below. Either way, this seems to actually be applying realistic dirty air. It could make racing worse, but that's how it is in real life, and if that's what we're chasing here, this is a good change. The DRS also benefits from improved aero modeling. If you run a car set up with lots of rear wing angle, the increased drag will hurt your top speed on the straights, but you will notice a bigger benefit of DRS when it's open compared to a car with a very skinny rear wing setting that can already get closer to terminal velocity without the DRS open. Again, nice change, very realistic change, and it makes a lot of sense. So from what I've heard, from what we've seen and what's out there publicly, it does seem like overall this year, slipstream, DRS, very powerful, but dirty air to kind of counteract that kind of overpowered slipstream is going to be the kind of nullifier in all of this. So very much copying what real life F1 is like. Improved vehicle modeling means that the chassis and the floor profiles for each of the 24 season cars are more accurate than ever before. This will give more experienced players a chance to experiment with the ride height settings to fine-tune their aero performance on track, or each track, by adjusting the rake of the car. Now this is more of a career mode thing, because you're going to run realistic performance. In league racing, you're going to have equal cars, which hopefully are equal. If not, it's going to be the multiplier car being ran like in esports, but basically each car might have a variant in setup to extract the best performance in the aero side. Now I mentioned before, we'll come back to it, and here it is, new power unit settings. We are giving you more control over the car's power unit to give you more opportunities to adapt to changing circumstances and strategies in the races, just like real life. Our throttle maps have been enhanced, so the cars sequentially request more horsepower as your input on the pedal gradually increases on the exit of a corner. So this is pretty big and could completely change the way, again, the cars handle on corner exit, because this reduces wastage from the electrical part of the hybrid engine and opens the door for more advanced tactical driving. So essentially we're kind of taking away from the hybrid systems, and it's more on you to kind of make sure you maximize performance with engine modes, which is very important to differentiate between engine modes and battery modes. Very important. For the first time, you can now manually derate the power delivery and put more energy back into the ERS by lifting and coasting at the end of a straight before the braking zone, saving your vital battery power to deploy in an attack or defense later in the lap or later in the race. Now, from what I can tell, we could already do this, but the fact it says you can manually derate, I'm assuming, and based off what we've seen, is that battery modes are now manual again. So usually you're locked to medium in race trim, but you can now probably run none if you want to derate manually. ERS deployment modes have also been adjusted for this year by popular demand, and because it's more realistic, which is true, we have brought back the option to swap between ERS modes on the fly in every session of a race weekend, meaning settings like hot lap can be used once again in the middle of the race, further enhancing your tactical options in battle. The overtake mode has also been made more aggressive. Now this is big. I get the feeling this is a slightly different thing to what I mentioned before on the manual derate, so watch this space. I'm not too sure about that, but this is huge, and essentially, in a nutshell, it's the reintroduction of manual ERS management modes, which we used to have, I think, up until F1 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So you could run, your own battery mode depending on if you're attacking or defending. Also, we've seen publicly, it's out there, that the overtake this year is super aggressive. If you use battery, you can go from 100 to 0 in one long straight, but it also recharges quicker as well. So it's going to be a lot more, I'd say, dynamic, a lot quicker. You're going to get a lot more action, and it's going to be a lot more variable, so you have to be more tactical with it, which I like. It's a good thing to have, especially with the dirty air and the new Aero and physics. If you're going to have that dirty air wash, slipstream stronger, DRS is stronger. If you're going to have stronger battery and different battery modes, that also is going to add a lot more tactical aspects to battling. And just confirming what I just said, some settings like overtake will drain the battery faster than in previous games. You now have many more tools and tactics available to recharge quickly and get the battery back and get back on the front foot in the race. So again, it gets used quicker, charges quicker, but there's other things which you can use. And one of those things which I don't think is mentioned here, which I will say, in the setup menu, there's stuff like engine braking this year, which is an actual setting. The differential has been adjusted, so that whole side of the engine mapping and aspects has been redone, remapped, remodeled, and that is going to play into all of this as one big kind of, big pie of tactical racing. And it says next up, career mode, which we'll cover later today. So overall, I'm going to give my thoughts really quickly on all of this and the trailer, because I feel like it's worth noting also there's a few things out there publicly which we can discuss. So this new game, I personally would like to see F1 23 as a baseline. We all agree, you can be more critical or less critical, but the advance and development from 22 to 23 in the handling model was massive. So if we can start with 23 as a base, that would be a good starting point, and basically develop and evolve that into more realistic handling. So from what we've seen, it sounds really, really good. I can't lie, I'm actually keen. I haven't done a single lap yet. I don't have the beta, so I don't know what it's actually going to be like, but from what we've seen, heard, and what this says, we are going to have a bit of a game changer on our hands in terms of F1 games. Almost in some aspects a Back to the Future, going back to 2018, 17, 19, 20, maybe even 21. I can't remember if energy modes were changeable in that game, but the way you race now, managing your battery, your differential, your engine braking, it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays into one. Stronger battery in terms of how it affects you, and the overtake mode is more powerful, stronger DRS, stronger slipstream, but dirty air, and also wet racing lines to cool your tyres. Overall, it seems like a very positive step to more realistic handling and a more realistic experience, but we'll see how that translates to the final thing. But there we go, guys. I'm going to leave it there. We have another video later on for the career mode deep dive, which I'm very excited about, guys. There is some very juicy stuff in that one, and I'm telling you that now in advance because I know what's in the trailer. So stay tuned. Tune back in later, more like the video and subscribe. Let's try and smash over 1,000 likes. And if you're new, get subscribed for the latest breaking news regarding F1 24. I'll have also early access exclusive gameplay coming very, very soon as well, guys. So stay tuned to the channel for that. But yeah, cheers for watching. As always, a big shout out to the members. Check all my links down below, guys, for my channel partners and all the gear that I use. And then also check out the 2 videos on screen, including the previous F124 video on the reveal if you haven't seen it. But guys, cheers for watching, and I'll see you soon. Adios.